When Prince Andrew stepped forward at a private Windsor gathering and dropped the bombshell that Princess Margaret had gifted her most iconic necklace not to her own descendants, but exclusively to Princess Eugenie, jaws dropped, whispers exploded into full-blown chaos. But what if this wasn't just a gesture of affection, but a message from beyond the grave, one that fractures the family and unearths secrets long buried? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. No one in the room expected Andrew to speak. Not at this point in the evening, and certainly not with such finality. But there he stood, shoulders square, voice unnervingly calm as he declared that Princess Margaret's famed sapphire and diamond necklace was not left to her niece or her granddaughters, but to his own daughter, Princess Eugenie. The words lingered like smoke in the air, slow to disperse and impossible to ignore. It was a moment heavy with history, laced with betrayal and brimming with unspoken tension, and it didn't take long for the reactions to ripple outward. Camilla's eyes reportedly narrowed, her hands clasped a little too tightly around her wineglass. Princess Anne's expression darkened, as if calculating just how deep this unexpected truth would cut through decades of royal expectation. The necklace wasn't just any heirloom, it was the necklace, worn by Margaret during her most rebellious years, often a silent symbol of defiance against the rigid structure of the crown. A piece so iconic that it was thought to have been kept under lock and key, either promised to the senior royals or retained as a future museum treasure. And yet here was Andrew, stating without hesitation that Margaret had privately willed it to Eugenie. Why? Why now? Why Eugenie? Speculation erupted almost immediately. Had Andrew known about this for years and chosen now of all times to unleash it? Was this his way of reclaiming some thread of relevance in a royal world that had slowly pushed him to the fringes? And perhaps more importantly, was this a calculated attempt to elevate Eugenie's position or a reckless move destined to ignite chaos? Eugenie herself appeared stunned, caught off guard not just by the revelation, but by the very public nature of it. Her face reportedly flushed, eyes darting to her sister, to her mother, to anyone who might offer her a clue of how to respond. And there, just a few feet away, stood Beatrice, face drained of colour, lips pressed in a trembling line. Her silence was louder than any scream. Everyone in that room understood what was happening. This wasn't just about inheritance, it was about legitimacy, about legacy, about who mattered and who didn't. What Margaret had intended as a private gesture of affection had, in Andrew's hands, become a royal reckoning, a moment so jarring, so unexpected, that it fractured the evening like shattered crystal. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol, a statement, and depending on who you asked, it was either an act of love or a declaration of war. As stunned silence descended on the room, the weight of Margaret's decision began pressing on royal consciences. But the necklace wasn't the only inheritance Margaret left behind, unresolved truths, and now they were ready to haunt. Princess Margaret's life was one of contradictions, duty versus desire, royal status versus wild rebellion. But behind the cocktails and controversies was a woman fiercely loyal to those she chose, and quietly dismissive of those she didn't. Was Eugenie her final confidant and Beatrice left out on purpose? It wouldn't be the first time Margaret's preferences rippled through the palace with seismic effect. She had always possessed an unspoken power, one not granted by title but carved out by charisma, defiance, and a daring emotional intelligence that often went unacknowledged by the public but was keenly felt behind palace walls. Unlike her sister, Queen Elizabeth, Margaret's loyalties weren't governed by protocol. They were deeply personal. She loved instinctively, chose fiercely, and dismissed coldly. And in her final years, those choices became even more pointed. That's when whispers began to emerge. Margaret was spending increasing time with Eugenie. Quiet lunches, unrecorded chats in Kensington, and shared silences that spoke volumes. To those who knew her, Margaret had become enchanted by Eugenie's warmth, her willingness to listen, and most of all, her refusal to play the part expected of her. Friends of the late princess claimed she once said, "That girl sees through the nonsense. She sees people, not titles." It was high praise from someone who rarely gave it. Unlike Beatrice, whose posture, speech, and attitude often mirrored the regal mold that Margaret had spent her life rejecting, Eugenie represented something freer, something closer to the Margaret that could have been: spirit, empathy, independence. The very things Margaret felt had been drained from royal life, Eugenie seemed to carry like a hidden torch. And so, while the rest of the family assumed that the iconic necklace, the same one Margaret had famously worn at some of her most defiant public appearances, would follow a path of traditional inheritance, Margaret was quietly rewriting the rules. It was no longer about who came first by birth. It was about who came closest by soul. And Eugenie, in Margaret's eyes, had earned that place. The necklace, heavy with symbolism, was more than a gift. It was a benediction, a transfer not of royal rank, but of spiritual succession, an heirloom carrying unspoken truths about what it meant to be. Seen, understood and chosen. Beatrice, for all her grace and ambition, may have unwittingly mirrored too much of the institution Margaret had spent decades challenging. Her deference to royal structure, her hunger for approval, her careful alignment with the crown's image, all of it may have created a quiet rift that neither of them acknowledged, but both understood. And Margaret, as always, chose the one who stood slightly outside the frame, the one she believed would understand the burden and the beauty of being overlooked and underestimated. Still, one lingering question shadows every corner of this revelation. Did Margaret intend this to be an act of love or an act of provocation? Was she reaching out to lift Eugenie into the light, or driving a final wedge into the family that never quite understood her? That answer, like so many of Margaret's motives, remains hidden beneath layers of charm, pain, and fiercely guarded secrets. But while some interpreted Margaret's gesture as pure affection, others in the royal corridors saw it as a deliberate slight, a coded rejection that would now ignite long-standing rivalries. For Princess Beatrice, the necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a long-expected inheritance, a symbol of her worth. And in one thunderclap of truth, it was gone. As tears welled behind steely smiles, whispers began: had she been overlooked or intentionally erased? The moment Margaret's necklace was revealed to have gone to Eugenie, something inside Beatrice fractured. She didn't cry. She didn't storm out. Instead, she smiled, a thin, practiced smile that masked the eruption within. Those who know her describe that night as one where Beatrice looked devastated behind composed eyes. It wasn't just about a royal heirloom. It was about identity, position, recognition. From childhood, Beatrice had been the elder, the one expected to lead. The one, groomed for the invisible crown of duty. And the necklace? That was always understood to be hers. Whispers within the royal circle had long attached it to her. Courtiers noted it in passing, fashion historians speculated publicly, and even family members seemed to nod in silent agreement. Until now, and now all of it was gone. Gifted not to the one who followed rules, but to the one who broke with tradition. To Beatrice, it wasn't just a misstep, it was a message. And the message was painfully clear: she wasn't chosen. Behind closed doors, the emotional fallout began. Tensions between the sisters, once subtle and dormant, flared to life. The bond that had weathered public scrutiny and royal pressure began to strain. Beatrice, usually measured, grew distant. Snaps replaced support. Coldness crept into once warm exchanges, and as the days passed, deeper cracks formed beneath the surface. In a private exchange with a longtime aide, Beatrice confessed what many feared she was feeling. "I wasn't just left out," she said. "I was disinherited in spirit." Those words carried weight heavier than inheritance itself. Because to be disinherited wasn't just about jewels or wealth. It was about legacy, about being seen. And suddenly Beatrice felt invisible. The Queen's silence in the aftermath only deepened the wound. While senior royals murmured their concern behind palace doors, Her Majesty offered no clarification, no reassurance, no public acknowledgement. Was it possible she knew? Had Margaret informed her? Or was she too stunned, too restrained by tradition to intervene? Whatever the reason, the absence of support echoed louder than any denial. Across the walls of Windsor and in private royal galleries, family portraits were now being re-examined with new eyes. Photos once seen as affectionate were suddenly scrutinized for signs of imbalance, one child standing closer, another. He was the man she loved, the man she was willing to defy the monarchy for. And yet, the crown guarded by her own sister. The Queen refused to allow it. Margaret was forced to choose between love and loyalty, and in choosing the crown, she lost a part of herself forever. That betrayal ran deep, not just because of Townsend, but because it came from within her own blood. And though Margaret never publicly lashed out, those close to her say she never truly forgave. Her relationship with Queen Elizabeth in later years became clipped, distant, and irreversibly formal. Two sisters, bound by duty, yet divided by choices never reconciled. That sense of being silenced, diminished, and boxed in by royal protocol led Margaret to gravitate toward those who stood on the edge of the royal spotlight. Those who, like her, weren't the heirs but the ones who watched from the shadows. Eugenie, with her gentle defiance and empathetic gaze, reminded Margaret of herself. Not the glamorous, rebellious woman the tabloids adored, but the young girl torn between who she was and who she was expected to be. And in that mirror, Margaret found a quiet comfort, one that deepened in her final years. There are now whispers that the necklace long assumed to be earmarked for someone else. Perhaps even a senior royal had a different intended path until Margaret changed her will just months before her passing. Royal aides close to her estate noticed discreet visits from her private solicitor, unrecorded meetings with no public explanation, documents quietly updated, signatures made in solitude. Whatever was written during those meetings was locked away, until now. The necklace, it seems, was only the first ripple. What truly rattles the palace today isn't just the gift itself, it's the growing fear that it was only one part of a broader message. Some believe letters remain undiscovered. Others insist. There are journals, sealed boxes, or even audio recordings that could further unsettle the fragile balance inside the royal household. Margaret was known to write candidly, brutally at times, especially when she felt betrayed. And if any of those words see the light of day, they could rewrite not just her legacy, but the narratives of those still sitting on the throne. Because for Margaret, revenge was never theatrical. It was subtle, intentional, and perfectly timed. Her legacy, long underestimated, may now become the force that fractures the image of royal unity once again. If Margaret's act was one of quiet rebellion, its aftershocks were anything but, because the palace was about to turn on itself in whispers, suspicion, and strategic silence. Queen Camilla has long maneuvered the palace with unshakable poise. But this time, the necklace drama tested her limits. Allies turned evasive, traditions shattered, and behind closed doors, Camilla reportedly gave an ultimatum: control your family or I will. For years, Camilla has played the long game quietly, efficiently, and always one step ahead. She entered the monarchy not just as a consort, but as a strategist. Where others sought favor, she sought control. And in most cases, she got it. But this necklace scandal was chaos she did not engineer, and chaos she could not ignore. The moment Margaret's sapphire and diamond heirloom was revealed to have landed in Eugenie's possession without prior notice or protocol, Camilla knew something had shifted. Something dangerous. In her view, the royal jewelry collection wasn't a matter of sentiment. It was structure. It was balance. A binding thread of continuity between the crown and its lineage. For Andrew to disrupt that balance and for Eugenie to accept it without deferral was, in Camilla's eyes, a direct challenge to everything she'd helped stabilize. Sources close to the palace say Camilla walked out of a senior meeting in anger when the subject of Eugenie and the necklace resurfaced. It wasn't the gift itself that unnerved her, it was the message it sent. That personal history could trump palace hierarchy, that a disgraced prince could still make power plays, that Margaret's ghost still had a voice louder than the current queen. Camilla, ever attuned to perception, understood how damaging this was for Charles's reign. If personal allegiances and inherited sentiment started undermining royal order, the cracks would soon show, not just behind closed doors but on the world stage. She began moving quickly. One-on-one conversations with Princess Anne grew more frequent, each one laden with veiled frustration. Anne, the enforcer of tradition, understood Camilla's concerns and reportedly agreed this could not become precedent. Together, they started reviewing the unwritten rules of private heirlooms, questioning past allocations and pressing for a formal reassignment process to prevent another rogue inheritance. Camilla wanted Margaret's gesture reframed, if not publicly, then within the family. The necklace, she insisted, had to be treated as a singular aberration, not the start of a new trend. And then came the true complication: Eugenie herself. Calm, soft-spoken, but now unmistakably assertive. She defended the gift. She called it personal. She claimed Margaret's intention was clear, and in doing so, she stood in silent defiance of Camilla's authority. It was not loud, it was not theatrical, but it was unmistakably a refusal to yield. Camilla viewed it as insubordination dressed in innocence, a young royal standing her ground not out of rebellion but out of quiet conviction. And that, in Camilla's mind, made it all the more dangerous. The air around them grew cold. What had started as a family moment was evolving into a silent power struggle between the monarchy's two faces, the seasoned queen determined to maintain order, and the young royal unwilling to let go of a legacy she was chosen for. But even as Camilla worked to restore order, a far more dangerous ripple began to form, one that would test loyalties in the most personal way possible. They were once inseparable, two sisters against the royal tide. But now, as one inherits a legacy and the other stands empty-handed, silence turns to tension. A glance becomes a cold shoulder. And for the first time, the York girls may be truly divided. In the quiet days that followed Andrew's shocking disclosure, something between Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie cracked. They didn't shout. There was no dramatic confrontation. But something far more painful took hold, an unspoken drift, the kind that doesn't scream but echoes. It began with short replies to texts, missed calls, long pauses at family gatherings. Those who knew them best said it was like watching a mirror break slowly every ref. Lection of their former closeness, splintered by the weight of something neither fully dared to name. Mutual friends have described them as no longer aligned. A diplomatic phrase masking the raw truth. A rift has opened. And for sisters who once stood shoulder to shoulder, that chasm feels impossibly wide. Eduardo, Beatrice's husband, reportedly stepped in behind the scenes. Protective, pragmatic, and deeply wary of palace politics, he urged Beatrice to retreat from the unfolding drama, to prioritize her peace, her child, her dignity. He saw the necklace not just as a symbol of what Beatrice lost, but of what Eugenie gained and what that gain cost their relationship. And in many ways he wasn't wrong, because while Eugenie never asked for this, she accepted it. Quietly, gracefully. And that, to Beatrice, felt like a betrayal too deep to undo. Eugenie, for her part, wrestled with a storm of conflicting emotions. She never wanted the necklace to divide them. She never asked for Margaret's gift. But when it came, she didn't return it either. She couldn't. It felt like an echo of something sacred, a whisper from a woman who had seen her not just as a royal, but as a person. Still, the look in Beatrice's eyes the night of the revelation, shocked, hurt, hollow, has haunted her. In private, Eugenie has questioned her role in all of it. Could she have done more? Could she still? There was a moment, a fragile attempt to bridge the gap. A quiet walk in Windsor Gardens. Just the two of them. No press, no palace aides. Eugenie reportedly apologized. Not for the necklace, but for the silence, for the space that had grown between them. But Beatrice didn't cry, she didn't shout, she just nodded, once. And that was it. Whatever they were before, inseparable, united, unshakable, was now just memory. Their childhood is now a tender ache. The shared bedrooms, the whispered jokes during public events, the united front in a world that always demanded more than they could give. All of that now lives in a space neither seems to know how to return to. And while their public smiles may remain polished, the distance between them has never felt more real. As the sisters drift apart, the royal family faces a choice: silence the story or let it spiral. But someone else was about to speak. Just when the dust seemed ready to settle, a hidden letter was discovered, folded behind the velvet lining of the necklace box. In Margaret's unmistakable hand, a few haunting lines, and a final sentence that would turn everything upside down. The discovery wasn't announced with fanfare. It wasn't even meant to be found, at least, not yet. But as Eugenie held the necklace days after the revelation, a slight shift in weight, a subtle rustle beneath the velvet, led her fingers to something unexpected. Tucked beneath the lining was a small envelope, aged and creased, with her name written in Margaret's bold, unmistakable script. For a moment, the room fell away, and in the silence that followed, Eugenie opened what would become the most intimate and devastating confirmation of what had already been whispered across the palace walls. The letter was brief, just a few paragraphs, but each word struck like thunder. Margaret spoke not of royal obligations or public image, but of emotion, memory, and regret. She described Eugenie as a light in a house of mirrors, someone she had watched grow with gentle resilience and a courage hidden beneath kindness. She admitted to seeing something in Eugenie that reminded her of who she might have been had she not been bound to a life of compromise. In those lines, Eugenie found more than admiration, she found a connection that transcended blood and title. Then came the line that pierced through the heart of everything, a veiled, unmistakable reference to her sister, the one who mirrors the crown. We'll never see beyond it. It wasn't cruel, but it was pointed. It spoke volumes in its restraint. To Eugenie, it revealed what Margaret had never dared say aloud, that Beatrice, while devoted, had become too aligned with the structure Margaret had spent a lifetime resisting, too loyal to the image, too distant from the truth. It wasn't just a preference, it was judgment. And then, the final sentence. 7 words, handwritten with steady pressure. To you, my true heir in spirit. The words rang out like a private coronation, not of status, but of sentiment. It was not about crowns or carriages, it was about legacy, pain, and defiance. It was Margaret's final rebellion, wrapped in velvet and diamonds, now pulsing through Eugenie's hands. In that moment, everything changed. The guilt Eugenie carried, the confusion, the sorrow, it all gave way to something else. Clarity. The letter didn't erase the consequences of the gift, nor did it mend the heartbreak between sisters. But it gave Eugenie something far more enduring, purpose. She now held not just a necklace, but a burden, a blessing, a choice. And in the deepest part of her heart, she knew nothing in the palace would ever look the same again. The final sentence echoed in Eugenie's mind as she clutched the note, but in the shadows of truth. Another storm was gathering, one that could reshape the monarchy's emotional legacy. What began as a simple inheritance has become a royal earthquake. The necklace is no longer just a jewel, it is a symbol of defiance, division, and destiny. And as the monarchy struggles to present a united front, one question lingers in the halls of Windsor: was Margaret's final gift a blessing or a curse? The fallout was impossible to contain. What should have been a quiet transfer of sentiment had spiraled into a full-blown crisis, forcing the royal household into emergency optics mode. Behind the grandeur of tradition, a storm brewed as strategists and senior aides scrambled to revise protocol. How do you navigate a world where personal gifts now carry political weight? How do you present unity when emotions refuse to be silenced? Margaret's necklace, meant as a private legacy, had detonated at the very heart of the firm's public narrative. Suddenly, personal affection was being read as rebellion, sentiment as subversion. Inside palace walls, tensions remained high. King Charles, caught between personal loyalty and public perception, struggled to hold the line. Camilla, still seething over what she viewed as an orchestrated humiliation, grew colder in her dealings with the Yorks. And Andrew, emboldened or cornered, depending on who you ask, refused to retreat. What began as a father's proud declaration now threatened to upend the entire hierarchy of influence within the family. The invisible lines of respect and tradition had been blurred, and every interaction since had been laced with subtext and suspicion. Meanwhile, the media frenzy only grew louder. Tabloid headlines turned the necklace into a metaphor for royal fracture, devoting columns to every shift in posture, every missed glance, every carefully worded press release. Public engagements became overshadowed by whispers of division. The monarchy, once again, was playing defense not over scandal but sentiment. And that, some say, is far more dangerous. In academic circles, royal historians began revisiting Margaret's legacy. No longer cast as merely the party-loving rebel, She was now viewed as a woman who wielded emotional power in quiet, deliberate ways. Her choice to give the necklace to Eugenie, once assumed to be a whimsical favor, was being reframed as a calculated commentary on lineage, character, and the cost of survival in the royal cage. It was, perhaps, her final act of rebellion, one that she knew would outlive her and force the family to confront truths they'd long buried beneath tradition. And then, there was Eugenie. Days after the letter surfaced, she stepped into a quiet charity appearance, and around her neck, unmistakable under the collar of her coat, was the necklace. She didn't mention it. She didn't have to. That single gesture spoke louder than any press release. Was it tribute, defiance, closure? No one knows for certain, but in wearing it she sealed the story's place in royal history. It was no longer a private inheritance. It was a public legacy. And so, a necklace once sparkling in royal ballrooms now glows in controversy, its chain binding not just diamonds, but decades of unresolved royal emotion. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.